My name is Alicia Duncan, and today I'm here to share my mom's story and my family's story about the horrific outcome of what can happen when we allow poorly legislated laws around medical assistance in dying. In February of 2020, my mom was in a minor car accident. My young daughter was in the car at the time, and she was completely fine. However, my mom was diagnosed with a concussion, and 3 weeks later, we went into COVID lockdown. It was very difficult for my mom to access care at the time, and over the next 20 months, her health slowly deteriorated. She began losing weight. The doctors were unable to determine what the cause could be. They ruled out everything from cancer to fibromyalgia. It was 2 days before my mom's scheduled medical assistance in dying that she let us know that she would be dead in less than 48 hours. And my sister and I, knowing that she had no terminal diagnosis, no diagnosis other than depression, that something was very wrong. And we believed that we could stop this because surely the law would protect someone like my mom in a mental health crisis. And so we went to the police. And the police told us that there was nothing we could do, that they could do, because all of the paperwork was in place. We were outraged and we could not believe that this was happening. And they told us that in order for us to stop this, we would need a court order. And so we went to the provincial courthouse and we pled for my mom's life in an emergency hearing. And thankfully, the judge granted us a warrant for my mom's arrest under the Mental Health Act. Sadly, my mom, who was suffering from suicidal ideation, attempted to take her own life, and she ended up being sectioned, ironically, in the psychiatric unit that she used to manage as a psychiatric nurse. I can't explain to you how traumatic it is to be relieved that your mom is in a psychiatric unit. We thought at this point she would be safe, that she would be protected. But 48 hours later, under the Canadian law, she was assessed again, and being a psychiatric nurse, she knew exactly the things to say to pass the assessments. And 4 hours later, we received a text message that my mom was dead and her body had been taken to a crematorium. I have since been diagnosed with PTSD. My sister has been diagnosed with PTSD. And under the expansion of our law in 2027, this would qualify us for medical assistance in dying. That irony is also not lost on us. Over the past 3.5 years since my mom's passing, my sister and I have spoken in parliaments worldwide. We have shared our story on international media platforms to warn people what can happen when we trust that the legislation is going to protect vulnerable people like my mom. My mom, who was self-starving, who was starving herself, who was 78 pounds at the time of her death, was not protected by our laws because under our current legislation, she was deemed as someone who was terminal. Let me be clear, my mom had no terminal diagnosis. I have spent over $40,000 with the top law firm in Canada fighting to get my mom's MAID assessment records. Her death was the first investigation into a MAID death in Canada, and the police were forced to close their investigation because the Fraser Health Authority, to this day, has refused to release my mom's MAID assessment records. Our family believes that the law was not followed, and there is absolutely no recourse for families to ensure that my mother's death was lawful. I believe it is morally irresponsible to consider expanding a law that has so many gaps currently that someone with a mental health condition who starved themselves could be approved. This is just one sad case of an example of what can happen, and I am terrified about what will happen in March 2027 if we allow this to expand for people who do have mental health conditions. I highly encourage every single person to contact their MP to support this bill. This is not an issue for any political party. This is a human rights issue. And I really, really just want to reiterate that we can't protect our family members. There's nothing we can do to protect our family members and our loved ones if we don't change the legislation. And so I just want to thank Tamara again for bringing this to our attention, and so we can hopefully save vulnerable people like my mom. Thank you.
And quick question for Alicia. What year did this happen to your mom, and what are the next steps that you're taking right now? Like, are you still battling with Fraser Health?
My mom received MAID on October 29th, 2021, so it's been 3.5 years. The most recent update, we spent 18 months waiting for a hearing with the OIPC. So the Privacy Commission has upheld the decision to essentially hold the records from us, saying that her right to privacy remains after death. The police have told us that should we get any new information, they would be willing to reopen the investigation. So there is one other avenue where we can challenge this further, but at this point, we are really just speaking out in media. I have a memoir coming out in October, November, right around the time that this bill will be voted on, just to share more about the details of our story. And I think really it's important just educating people. Most people that I speak to don't realize that you can't access MAID unless you're terminal. And what's actually true is that you can access MAID within 24 hours now in Canada. And people don't understand that. And so just really discussing, I know huge pro organizations like Dying with Dignity love to talk about how, 78% of Canadians support medical assistance in dying, but it's a faulty Ipsos poll that was taken. And when you just ask people in theory about whether they agree with this, they say they do. But when you actually talk about the details of the law and how people can be approved, support actually drops to about 10 to 11%. And so it really is just educating, speaking to people. I'm active with different groups and, obviously Tamara, and just sharing our stories. So we have no legal avenue really to fight this. And so we're just going to keep speaking as loudly as we can.
Alex with True North. I have a question for Alicia as well. You had mentioned that you are a part of the first criminal investigation in Canada with regards to MAID. Are you aware if there are any more criminal investigations related to MAID? And also, generally speaking, what were your communications with the police like during that investigation?
So actually for the research for my memoir, I tried to find any other cases where the police had investigated. And although there were hundreds of complaints, as far as I know, our case is the only police investigated MAID death in Canada. And I think the reason for that is just because of the poor legislation that really it just has to be in the doctor's opinion that a person is suffering. And so there's no burden of proof for doctors. So that's deeply concerning, obviously. And sorry, what was the second part of that question?
What were your communications with the police like, right. Generally speaking? Do you feel like they took your concerns seriously?
Absolutely, yeah. It was the Abbotsford Police Department that investigated. My mom lived and died in Abbotsford. And they were absolutely wonderful to work with. They took our case very seriously. Major crimes investigated for almost 10 months. And at that point, they were talking to so many different professionals and organizations trying to just really understand the law and how this could have happened. Their own requests with my approval were denied to access the MAID assessment records. And so we really collaborated on the entire process. And I felt that they were just as upset as we were when they were forced to close the investigation. And I'm just very grateful for the support that we did get, because I do believe that it gave us the credibility to speak on the platforms that we've been able to. Thank you.